So, what are some of the opportunities in mining, in what I'd like to call this earth and environmental science and engineering? So the standards are industry. You're working for the Newmonts of the world, working for Freeport, working for Rio Tinto, working for the actual mining companies, the bad guys. Now also where the path that I followed is as a private consultant. As I said, I've done it for 20 years, and it's been a very fruitful 20 years. And as I said, I've been able to see a lot and be experienced and work with a lot of fine individuals. There's also opportunities as a regulator. That's where I cut my teeth. One of the things that I would say about being a regulator is that often you're faced with being the expert in many different fields, managing clients, managing emergency situations, managing enforcement, enforcing laws. I learned a lot about evidence. I learned a lot about a prima facie case supporting my analysis. I also learned about working with multidisciplinary groups under different settings, different mine management settings, as well as working with both federal, local, and state authorities. During this time, I actually shut a mine down because they had a long oil spill in Utah. They killed 1,500 fish, and I ended up having to do a court case and the like. So I really learned a lot. I learned a lot, and I can talk to you more about that. But that, for me, was very fruitful because I learned a lot about the mining industry. And knowing more about the industry and how it ticks and how the decisions are made and how finances are addressed has brought me to be able to, if you will, hit the high points, define the drivers for my clients. And when you can define those drivers, then the legitimacies for your seeking of funding and doing technical research and analysis is typically endorsed. But often you have to do that first and foremost, is be able to legitimize and rationalize why you're recommending for them to spend a lot of money on data collection, analysis, modeling, and then design, test work, and then full-scale construction. So another, yeah, go ahead.
Can you describe what Rio Tinto is? I recognize them. They sponsor a soccer team in Salt Lake City.
Yeah, yeah.
And on their front of their jerseys it says Rio Tinto.
Yeah. So Rio Tinto bought Kennecott. Rio Tinto is an Australian mining company. It is don't quote me on this, but I think it's one of the fourth largest mining companies in the world. Their portfolio stretches all throughout the world in precious metals, hard rock. I think they have a few coal projects. So they're a very diversified company. I've had great working relationships with them. They're a very high level, very well planned out mining company of the ones that I work for. And they are Australian based. And as a result, they're very practical in their approach to addressing issues. So I can talk to you a little bit more. That's not one of my primary clients, but it has been. So they are currently seeking consulting service to put together guidelines worldwide for mine reclamation and closure. And so, interesting you should ask that, but we're actually working on a proposal that's due in mid-December when I'll be back for a very exciting bit of work in putting together terms of reference, guidelines, standard operating procedures for mine closure and reclamation. So it's a good company though. One of the things that you may not initially think that you could apply your technical prowess to is lending institutions. More and more lending institutions are being very careful where their monies go, because one, they want to make sure that they're not buying into or creating a large liability that may create losses, monetary losses, or association with bad actors or bad projects. So World Bank, IFC, as well as investors are really looking for technical discipline leads and people who are more senior, but that can bring in junior level people to do a lot of the legwork. So you may not have thought about that, but that is an opportunity. So what are the specific disciplines that the mining industry really wants? And in 3 words, it's water, water, water. So anything dealing with water is king. As I said to you before, my first love was wildlife, and then practicality brought me into range science and soils. And now the realities of working for the mining world is water, water, water. Almost everything I do is geared towards compliance with clean water standards. Almost everything. So, water balance analysis, water resource engineering, groundwater hydrology, contaminant fate and transport. It's the biggie. It's the biggie for the industry. They live and die by compliance of those requirements. So, the next one is air, air, air. Now, I am not an air person. We have an entire group of people that do air modeling. That is not my end of the game. It's also the regulatory aspects are kind of lost to me, because the Clean Air Act was one of the first, well, it was the first major national environmental control law passed in 1972, and as a result, it's a very convoluted set of regulations. We've improved upon that. The Clean Water Act was a far greater improvement. CERCLA and RCRA was yet another improvement on that. The next axis is environmental engineering. This industry is dominated by engineers. So let's just be very frank. It's an engineer-dominating industry from the production side, and so as a result, on the environmental side, it's also engineering-dominated. So, as a indirect towards water, water, water geochemistry, I'm involved almost daily in waste rock management plans, basic characterization of waste rock qualities, and also tailings, looking at groundwater impacts. So geochemistry is an everyday aspect of the work that I do. Is there any questions? Any questions? Geotech is also another aspect. As you guys have maybe heard in the news, is unfortunately there was a tailings failure in Brazil, killed 16 people, and I think there's still a number of people that are still missing. Flooded a town with 360 million tons of tailings. Then there was also the Mount Polley tailings failure up in British Columbia. Destroyed salmon fisheries, or severely impacted salmon fisheries. So in mining, tailings, which is the processed waste, the fine processed waste that usually is disposed of as slurry, although that's changing, are contained behind dams. And it is the Achilles heel of the mining industry. So geotechnical stability, geotechnical engineering is also a very large aspect of the work I do. Also, pit slope stability. Kennecott, for instance, in Salt Lake, Rio Tinto's mine, they had a large failure on their pit, and as a result, there was other factors, but as a result, they laid off 1,100 people, and Kennecott Copper in Salt Lake is nearing probably a closure phase. Okay, so other aspects of earth and environmental engineering and sciences that sectors, if you will, is academia. Sonia has been got her PhD here and has now pursued a career in academia. I shied away from academia because I just wasn't that smart. So that was not I couldn't wait to get out of CSU. You can ask all my teachers and Ed Burdente, who was my advisor. I drove those guys crazy. So I don't really want to speak much to it, but I've spent my career trying to apply research and use the findings of research and sampling methods and analytical methods to address the issues that I face. So I've really tried to create that interface. I've tried to use academic methods to come about scientifically driven solutions that are often then practiced by engineers and are engineering projects. So there's also city, county, and state that can be extension specialists, which is a nice little gig if you can get it. They're hard to get, but increasingly counties and cities are opening up or allocating funds to buy lands, and as a result they need management of those lands, both from weeds, needs for weed, wildlife, recreation, water quality, slope stability, erosion stability, and river systems. So that's another aspect of the environmental world that you guys might want to consider. There's also advocacy, and Sanders' dad has chosen advocacy for the Wilderness Society. And Sanders' dad is one of the most brilliant people I've ever met. He had a photographic memory. I don't know if he does anymore, but his tact has been being a technical director for the Wilderness Society, and many of our friends have also followed that same realm. So essentially act on an advisory role for the advocacy. I think that's a very fruitful and can be very satisfying. I've seen the progress of Greg and Pete and others move that direction, and these guys do some excellent work. So nonprofits. There's organizations like WRV, which Sonia is pictured right here. There you go, Sonia. That's where we met this past summer. She got to meet my fine son, Hayden. So that's another group that you guys might want to consider, as well as international groups for humanitarian and relief groups. I can't emphasize enough the need to take what we know technically and try to bring that to the developing world. That is where the rubber is meeting the road these days. And there are so many issues that I'm going to challenge you with working in the developing world and trying to bring environmental stewardship and social consciousness into land management, into extractive resource management. I've just recently traveled to Africa, the little island off Africa, where I've come back after 18 years to the same site, and it's troubling and encouraging. I can talk to you more about why it's encouraging and troubling. But you guys, it is open. There's so much work to be done there. And so I'd highly recommend that you evaluate that. You will learn so much about different cultures as well as yourself, as well as the basis for your technical knowledge. It will be challenged through and through working internationally, and especially in the developing world. So I can't encourage you more. Okay, so I've given you a lot of advice, so I'm full of it. I hope to not get stuck in the mud or raise the bar too high or create a train wreck here. But one of the things that, if there's going to be a regret that I had, is that I didn't get my PhD or master's when I was here at CSU. And get the fundamentals down pat. Know your physics, your chemistry, your biology, your water quality, your flow dynamics. Figure those out. Get that down pat so that's part of your thinking. One of our best friends, Bob Lurch, said to me once, who's a brilliant PhD soil scientist who's been doing research, applied research for years. He said what his PhD did is just taught him how to take a subject to a degree that no one else did. And that I would highly recommend. Do this now while you don't have kids, you don't have a big debt that you have to work long hours as a consultant for. So highly recommend that. You can branch out and diversify later. The social, legal, and policy, those things they're not easy by any means, but you can incorporate that in your practice as a practitioner later. Also, learn about economics and financing. It will drive absolutely everything you do. And that comes from our friend Pete Morton, who's a natural resource economist, brilliant guy, and has taught me so much along the way about financing and economics and the legitimacy of claims made by oil and gas industry, logging companies, mining industry. So I've learned a lot from him and many others. Okay, so hopefully I am a good testament to this, but write and communicate exceptionally well. I work with a lot of brilliant people, as I'm sure you do, and there are a few of those that can't talk their way out of a paper bag. And it's so important for us to get funding, to bring in advocates, to assemble teams, to get them working for you, to advocate for a certain goal and outcome, is to be able to communicate well. And also work well with others. Leave the ego at home. That's for younger years. Get rid of that. It will serve you well. It was said by Bruce Cockburn, who's a great singer-songwriter. It only lives when you give it away. So give it away. Through that giving, you get so much back in return. I had a hard time for years admitting I was wrong. Now I do it almost every day. I hate to say it. But you learn so much from those failures, admitting that you're wrong. It also, once again, it allows you to collaborate, in my opinion, with people. It gives this opportunity for real collaboration. And in my life, and in the way my life structures, I've been most effective at working in groups rather than as a singular scientist or engineer. Learn to listen. Biggest thing, listen, and then have fun. Okay, so I want to give you an idea of where the mining industry is today. And what's your name?
My name's John.
John.
Can you explain that last picture?
Let's see here. What was it? I gotta go back page. Oh, so that's an armadillo. So who's the guy who does the lowdown? It's I'm going to forget his name. He wrote a book about being the armadillo in the middle of the road, and that you're pinched from all sides. There are no clear or optimal answers. No one's going to be happy with your recommendations. There's always going to be someone who's going to be yelling at you. So it's being pinched between a rock and a hard place. And often what happens is you get run over. But you got to keep driving down the road. So that's it. And I can't remember the guy's name, but I'll get to it later. But he writes a great periodical and is an advocate for a populist, kind of like Bernie Sanders politic, is grassroots. So